Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there's outrage from some quarters in Tunisia over the president's sponsoring of a member of his family as a possible replacement for the recently ousted prime minister. Also, refugees are trying to get processed through the South African system say that they're facing longer and longer waits. Some worry that it's not a coincidence, but a change in policy. And everything's in place for local elections that could mean big changes for South Africa's ruling party. Polls suggest that many frustrated voters may be planning to desert the ANC. It's a shift that the opposition is counting on. But first, Tunisia's President Beji Caid Essebsi came under fire on Tuesday for putting up a member of his family as a candidate to replace the country's sacked Prime Minister. Habib Essed was dismissed following a no-confidence ballot over the weekend, and the pressure's now on to pull together a new government to push through economic reforms. Our Sandra Lutyens brings us more.
Official consultations have only started yesterday, but President Essebsi has wasted no time in putting forward Youssef Chahed as a candidate to be Tunisia's next prime minister. It would be a big step up for someone who was Minister for Local Affairs in Habib Essed's failed government. Chahed is only 40 and he fits the profile that the major political parties are looking for. He's more dynamic, more politicized and closer to the parties than the technocrat Habib Essed. Youssef Chahed is also related to the president by marriage, and that closeness has made many uncomfortable in a country where Ben Ali's family used to rule everything before the revolution. Chahed's nomination is, however, all but a sure thing. President Essebsi still has to convince the major political parties, and notably Ennahda, the Islamist party. Ennahda, a powerful party, and the president will most likely have to give them powerful ministries in return. He still has until next Tuesday to choose the country's next prime minister.
Sandra Lutyens there for us in Tunis. Now, Libyan forces clashed with IS group militants in their stronghold of Sirte on Tuesday, taking advantage of US airstrikes on the coastal city. Fighters loyal to Libya's government of national accord have reportedly managed to gain ground against the jihadists on Tuesday, the second day that US warplanes targeted the extremists' positions. According to the Pentagon, 7 strikes have been carried out on Sirte so far. It's been controlled by IS groups since last June. President Barack Obama says that Washington has a stake in Libya's security.
It is in America's national security interests in our fight against ISIL to make sure that they're able to finish the job. And so we're working in partnership with them to assure that ISIL does not get a stronghold in Libya, even as Libya begins what is going to be a long process to establish a functioning government and security system there.
At least 15 people have reportedly been killed in a suicide car bombing in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi. The blast happened in the residential area of Al-Gawasha in the west of the city and targeted a gathering of the Special Forces unit of Commander Haftar's forces. The city's been plagued by violence since he launched an anti-Islamist campaign 2 years ago. According to sites linked to the group, the Shura Council of Benghazi Revolutionaries has claimed responsibility for the attack. Well, the UN's raised the alarm over the number of refugees fleeing South Sudan in the wake of the latest outbreak of violence there. Tens of thousands have poured into Uganda, Kenya and Sudan, reporting mass killings, lootings and forced recruitment of child soldiers. Altogether, almost 1 million people have left the country since war first broke out in December 2013. Juba saw clashes in July, that have jeopardized a peace deal between President Salva Kiir and the camp of his longtime rival Riek Machar. His supporters claim that several more people were killed in clashes over the weekend. Well, some refugees in South Africa say that they feel authorities there are stalling in dealing with their applications. Their fears that the holdup is not an accident, but a deliberate policy shift that could make it more difficult for foreigners hoping to stay.
Congolese living in South Africa are gathering here to deliver a memorandum to the United Nations office in Pretoria to get their message across.
So this is your copy?
Thank you.
Yes.
They're protesting against what they call the abuse of their fellow immigrants in South Africa. They say refugee status and residence permits are becoming more and more difficult to obtain.
Most of our applications as Congolese citizens take 4 or 5 years, where, according to the law, they should only take 8 months. We told them before, tensions are rising among our community.
These foreigners have taken their plight to the streets because they are seriously worried about their future. What makes it harder is a Home Affairs directive in February stipulating that refugees are no longer entitled to work permits.
Apart from that, we are asking that all of us who studied here should be given permanent residence so that they can find some work.
The Congolese are not the only ones feeling the change in attitude from immigration officers. All asylum seekers are now subject to stricter rules. Authorities say that 80% of asylum seekers are economic migrants and not political refugees. Security criteria has also been reinforced.
Home Affairs was not in what we call the security cluster of ministries, where your police and your defense are situated. Now they have been moved into the security cluster, and there is now an emphasis on a risk-based approach to immigration. But also now the Department of Home Affairs requires that you produce a police clearance from both your country of origin and every country you've lived in since your 18th birthday. And this just goes to show that they want to know who are we really letting into the country.
Since democracy, South Africa has opened its borders to just about everybody. But with the growing threat of terrorism, they've been forced to become more selective.
Well, staying with South Africa, the country's gearing up for Wednesday's local elections that, if they go as expected, could signal a change in the political landscape that could see the ruling ANC lose major seats. Opposition parties are hoping to capitalise on growing frustration with President Jacob Zuma and his camp. This report by Nicolas Chemin.
In this township in Johannesburg, many are disillusioned ahead of Wednesday's municipal elections. The unemployment rate in South Africa is 28%. Residents say the ANC, which has been in power since 1994, has failed to provide them with basic services.
The government has been promising us houses for years and years, but to no avail. They always come when there's time to be voting, but then after votes, nobody comes to us, you know.
Violence has also marred the campaign. At least 13 people have been killed in attacks often blamed on internal ANC friction. President Jacob Zuma's ANC has been weakened by graft scandals and its failure to tackle unemployment. The ANC has won all post-apartheid elections, but analysts say its current difficulties mean that for the first time these polls are hard to predict.
It actually means that our democracy is becoming more competitive and more exciting. And that, by the way, will inject, in my view, an element of accountability in the political system, because no party can be guaranteed an outcome. And therefore, when they govern, they will have to make sure that they are accountable.
The Democratic Alliance, which is the main opposition party, hopes to win 3 key cities: Pretoria, Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth. It was previously seen as a party for middle-class whites, but it is now running under its first black leader, Mmusi Maimane. After this poll, the EFF, led by firebrand Julius Malema, could also emerge as a major player thanks to its populist policies.
More protests are planned in the Ethiopian city of Gondar after those held over the weekend. The demonstrations in the Amhara region came 2 weeks after another rally in which over a dozen people were killed. Karim Labor tells us more about the growing unrest.
The tens of thousands who have gathered in Gondar, despite the government's ban, show a growing discontent in the Amhara regions. An impressive turnout in a country where mass protests are uncommon. And this demonstration comes after weeks of unrest in Gondar, triggered by the decision to give land to the neighboring region of Tigray. But this protest reveals a deeper anger in Ethiopia, where critics and political opponents are often accused of terrorism. Amhara protesters expressed solidarity with similar protests in Oromia, which have shaken Ethiopia over the last 6 months and where severely suppressed. Amaras and Oromos together are the largest ethnicities in Ethiopia. They share a common perception that the political system is dominated, they say, by Tigrayans, and they clearly more and more openly challenge the iron fist rule of the party in power for 25 years in Ethiopia.
Kareem Lebo there for us in Addis Ababa. Well, finally, in Kenya, a 5-story structure collapsed on Tuesday in Nairobi. Residents were left in shock when the building quickly disintegrated into rubble. Luckily, no one was killed or hurt, as people living in the apartments had left a day earlier after they saw cracks appearing in one of the walls. In May, over 30 people were killed when a building went down in another part of the city following torrential rains. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Please do so again if you can. Take care.